I stood just outside the cockpit door, greeting passengers as they boarded. It was something I always liked to do, look people in the eye before I flew them across the sky. "Good afternoon. Welcome aboard," I said to a man in a baseball cap. He nodded, muttered a thanks, and kept walking. Then she appeared. Neatly pressed, beige coat, pearls, hair set like she was going to a church brunch instead of a cross-country flight. She stopped in front of me and blinked twice, as if she was trying to wake herself from a bad dream. "Good afternoon, ma'am," I said, my usual smile in place. "I'm your captain today." Her lips tightened. "Excuse me," I repeated, calm and clear. "I'm your captain. We'll be taking off shortly." Her gaze slid past me to the co-pilot's seat, then back to my face, like she was checking for a hidden camera. There must be some mistake," she said slowly, almost delicately, but with steel underneath. "No mistake," I replied. She turned sharply toward the gate agent still standing by the door. "I'd like to speak to someone in charge." I glanced at Ray, my co-pilot, who'd been adjusting his headset. He froze mid-motion, looked from her to me, and back again. Ma'am, Captain, not him." She cut him off. "You, the airline, whoever. I don't want to fly if she's in charge." The words were surgical, polite enough to avoid immediate outrage, but pointed enough to cut deep. I'd heard them before, in different forms. Sometimes they were dressed up as concerns about safety. Sometimes they were wrapped in nervous laughter. This time they were naked. Ray shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, Captuna has over 5,000 logged hours. She's Mrs. Lancaster's." Voice went sharp. "I am not questioning her resume, I'm questioning the airline's judgment." I kept my tone even. "Because of my race." Her mouth twitched, like I'd spoken something vulgar. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Mia, one of the flight attendants, had appeared at my side, her eyes flicking between us. "Is there a problem?" Mrs. Lancaster didn't even look at her. "Yes, I've flown for decades and I've never had this situation." "This situation," I repeated quietly. My palms itched, but I kept them at my sides. "Ma'am, my job is to get you where you're going safely. That's what I'm trained for. That's what I've done for years. And that's what I do today." She let out a small, sharp laugh. "We'll see." I looked her in the eye. "No, ma'am, you'll feel." The boarding line behind her was starting to back up. A man in a suit leaned to peek around her. "Could we move it along?" She huffed and walked down the aisle without another word, but not before muttering, "Standards just aren't what they used to be." Mia exhaled through her nose like she was trying not to explode. "Do you want me to talk to her?" I shook my head. "No, she's already decided who I am. I'll show her she's wrong." Ray still looked uncomfortable. She calmed down. "Once we're in the air," or I said, adjusting my uniform collar. She clinged to her fear until the wheels touched down. "Either way, I'm flying the plane." The next few passengers filed past with polite hellos. I could feel Mrs. Lancaster's presence even from here, the way her voice carried as she complained to the man beside her. The little pauses meant for others to agree. Mia leaned closer to me. "I hate people like that. They act like it's about qualifications. But you could have 20,000 hours, and it wouldn't matter." I smiled without humor. "I could have invented the plane, and it wouldn't matter." Ray glanced at me, then at the cockpit controls. "You okay?" I met his eyes. "I've been okay for a long time. Doesn't mean it doesn't get old." As boarding wrapped up, I did my final checks. I heard her voice again, drifting up from the cabin. "I just don't feel safe." The man beside her murmured something I couldn't catch. I strapped in and put on my headset. "You ready, Ray?" "Ready," he said, but his tone was still tentative, like he wasn't sure if he should say more. I decided to give him an easy out. "Let's just get them home." When we pushed back from the gate, I caught a final glimpse of Mrs. Lancaster through the open cockpit door. She was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, knuckles white around the armrest. She didn't know yet, storms or not. She was about to see exactly what I was capable of, ma'am. I'd told her, "I'll get you home safely whether you believe I can or not," and I meant every word. Mia met me in the galley just before we closed the doors. Her voice was low, but I could hear the heat under it. "Mia, you don't have to take that." I tightened my grip on the checklist in my hand. If I reacted every time someone came at me sideways, we'd still be boarding. "Mia, that wasn't sideways, that was straight at you." I exhaled slowly. "I know." Ray was leaning against the bulkhead, eyes fixed on the floor, like there was something fascinating about the carpet pattern. "Me, anything to add?" Ray, just we should focus on the flight." "Mia, focus on the flight." She just told a captain she didn't trust her to fly because of her skin color. Ray's shoulders hunched. I didn't say I agreed. Before I could answer, Mrs. Lancaster's voice carried down the aisle. "Mrs. Lancaster, is there any way to speak to corporate before we take off or mid-flight? I have a serious concern about the captain." I stepped out just enough for my voice to reach her. "Your concern has been noted, ma'am. We'll be taking off shortly." She turned halfway in her seat, projecting her words so the cabin could hear. "Mrs. Lancaster, you're not hearing me. I've flown for 40 years, never had to put my life in inexperienced hands." There it was, the pause before inexperienced, the hesitation where black wanted to slip out. I felt the words hit, but my voice stayed level. Ma'am, I have 5,237 hours logged in commercial aircraft. I've flown through microbursts, winter storms, and emergency descents. Trust me, I've trained for storms, not your approval. A man across the aisle cleared his throat. Passenger number 1. Seems like she's plenty experienced to me. Mrs. Lancaster's head snapped toward him. You don't know what it's like to trust your life to a stranger. He shrugged. I trust the one who's in uniform and knows how to fly, not the one complaining before we're even in the air. From behind her, another voice joined in. Passenger number 2. Captain, ignore her. Some people still live in the 1950s. I didn't respond to that one. Let them speak for me. Sometimes allies were more effective when they weren't invited, when they chose to step in because silence felt wrong. Mrs. Lancaster sat back in her seat with a loud sigh. Like she was the one being wronged. Ray murmured, just for me, maybe. Just let it die down. I turned to him. You can't let something die down when someone keeps fanning the flames. Mia smirked. She's not used to a captain who won't shrink when she starts talking. I met Mia's eyes. That's exactly the problem. Over the intercom, the gate agent announced we were ready for pushback. I walked back into the cockpit, Ray following quietly, but the voices from the cabin still carried faintly. Mrs. Lancaster, not about race, it's about competence. Passenger 1. Lady, I've got more faith in her than I do in you finding the restroom without help. A ripple of chuckles followed. I didn't smile. Not yet. The truth was, comments like hers didn't sting less with practice. They just left smaller scars. I adjusted my headset. Ready for checklist, Ray. Yeah, we went through it, but my mind wasn't on the switches and dials. It was on the fact that I could fly a flawless route, land in a crosswind, and still walk off this plane with someone deciding it was luck, not skill. Mia poked her head into the cockpit before takeoff. Mia, Captain, just so you know, row 14 and 15, they've got your back. Me, good to hear. She grinned. Row 13 too, but they're quieter about it. I chuckled once, then straightened. Time to fly. As I pushed the throttle forward, I thought about Mrs. Lancaster's voice, the weight of her words. I didn't need her to trust me. I just needed to land this plane so perfectly she'd have nothing left to hide behind. We'd been in the air for less than 10 minutes when Mia's voice came through the cockpit interphone. Mia, Captain, she's asking for the co-pilot, says it's urgent. I already knew who she was. Put her through. The line clicked, and Mrs. Lancaster's voice filled my ear. Mrs. Lancaster, I'd like to speak to someone in charge. Me, you're speaking to the captain of this aircraft. Mrs. Lancaster. No, I mean your partner, the other pilot. I glanced at Ray. He gave me a weak half-shrug, the kind that said, do you want me to take this? I pressed the button again. Ma'am, both pilots are equally responsible for this flight's safety, but as captain, your concerns come to me. Mrs. Lancaster, I think I'd be more comfortable if he handled things. Ray looked at me, then at the controls, clearly torn. Ray, maybe just let her vent. I cut him off. This isn't venting, this is erasing me. Silence for a second, except for the hum of the engines. Mrs. Lancaster, oh, for heaven's sake, you're making this about something it's not. I'm just concerned about safety. My grip on the yoke tightened. No, you're concerned about me existing where you didn't expect me. You don't see me as the safe option because I don't look like your idea of a pilot. Mrs. Lancaster, that's not true. I don't care what you look like. I let out a humorless laugh. You care enough to call the co-pilot because I'm not the color you trust. You'd rather talk to a stranger than the person who's been flying this plane from the second we left the ground. Mrs. Lancaster, you're twisting my words. Me, no, I'm just not letting you dress them up as something they're not. Ray shifted uncomfortably beside me. Maybe we can. I looked at him. Do you know how many times I've been in this position where one complaint, one moment of doubt, outweighs everything I've done right? He didn't answer. I kept going, my voice low but steady. When I was training, every mistake stuck to me like it was proof of something bigger. If I missed a checklist step, it wasn't just human error. It was because maybe she's not cut out for this. Every success, just luck. Do you know what that's like, Mrs. Lancaster? I've been in high-pressure jobs. I know what it's like to be judged. Me, you know what it's like to be judged as you. You don't know what it's like to be judged. As a category, I can't afford a bad day without it turning into a story about all of us. She scoffed. I think you're overreacting. That word overreacting landed like a slap, right? Because the easiest way to dismiss someone is to tell them their reaction is too big. It's a neat little trick. It lets you avoid the fact that you started it. Ray's voice was quiet now. She's not going to change her mind mid-flight, mate. I'm not trying to change her mind. I'm making sure she doesn't think her mind is the only one that matters. Mrs. Lancaster, if this is how you handle criticism, maybe me. Criticism is about performance. This is about prejudice. Don't pretend they're the same. The line went silent. For a second, I thought she'd hung up. Then Mrs. Lancaster, fine, fly the plane, just get us there. Me, that was always the plan. I ended the call and set the interphone back in its holder. My pulse was still fast. Dr. A cleared his throat. You didn't have to me. Yes, I did. Because the minute I let that slide, I tell every other woman. every other black pilot coming up behind me, that it's okay for someone to strip your authority because they don't like your face. And it's not okay. He didn't reply. Just stared ahead at the clouds, maybe thinking about which side of the conversation he'd been on for a moment. The cockpit was quiet, except for the steady beeping of the instruments. I focused on the horizon, the calm above the storm systems below us. She thought this was about comfort. I thought about every hour I'd sat in training rooms, every check ride, every time I'd had to be perfect just to be seen as adequate. And I knew she wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. But she would remember this flight. The first jolt hit like a sudden drop on a roller coaster. My stomach lurched, my hands tightened around the yoke. Wind shear, I asked, keeping my voice even. Ray scanned the readings. Could be I'm seeing pressure drop. East quadrant. The cabin rattled. Overhead bins clicked, and a suitcase tumbled out somewhere behind us. Gasps followed. Sharp and panicked, I pressed the intercom. Mia, secure the cabin. We might hit a rough patch. Her voice crackled back. Already on it, Captain. The second jolt was worse, a hard sideways shove. I felt the nose drift and corrected instantly. ATC's calling, Ray said. Storm front ahead just came out of nowhere. Of course it did. The sky changes when it wants to. No warning, no fairness, control. This is flight 782, I said into the headset. We've got visual on heavy cloud buildup. Request vector. Adjustments. Static, then a rushed voice. Negative, 782. Weather system moving faster than expected. Recommend holding course until we plot a gap. Ray muttered under his breath. Great. So we dance. Then let's dance, I said, adjusting flaps. From the cabin, voice rose above the shuffle of passengers and the hum of the engines, sharp, cutting through the chaos. See, this is what I was worried about. Mrs. Lancaster. Not now. I didn't turn, just spoke over my shoulder loud enough to carry. Storms don't discriminate, ma'am. They just test who's ready, she huffed. I could hear it even through the din. Ray glanced at me. Want me to handle her? No, I said, my eyes locked on the instruments. I've been handling storms my whole life. Wind shift, 3 degrees starboard, he called, adjusting. The plane shuddered again. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced myself to breathe steady. Mia's voice came through again, quicker this time. Passengers are nervous. Lancaster keeps saying we should let a real pilot handle it. I bit down on the urge to laugh. Tell them the real pilot is busy keeping us all in one piece. The radio blared at flight 782. Heavy downdraft approaching from your port side. I felt it before the words finished. The sudden, sucking drop. My body pressed against the harness. My mind flashing to the simulator drills. To the hours and hours where failure wasn't an option because failure meant feeding the stereotype counter. I said, on it, Ray replied. The plane groaned under the correction. The wind screamed outside, slapping us from both sides. Climb 200 feet, I ordered. Get us over this band. Climbing through the windshield, the clouds churned like boiling water, flashes of white deep inside. ATC says you're almost clear, Ray reported. Almost isn't clear. My jaw ached from clenching. A loud crack lightning somewhere nearby. Mrs. Lancaster shrieked. The sound twisted in my gut, not because she was scared, but because I knew she'd pin that fear to me, hold it together. I muttered to the plane, to myself, maybe to her. Ray's voice cut in. We're out, and just like that, the turbulence eased. The yoke softened under my hands. The sky beyond was open, washed in gold from the setting sun. Mia's voice came over the intercom, calmer now, cabins steady, passengers mostly quiet. I glanced at Ray, then back at the horizon. Storm's done testing us. Ray smirked. Faintly think Lancaster got her answer. I allowed myself one breath of relief. If she did, she'd never admit it, but I didn't need her to. The sky had changed, and so had the balance in this cockpit. The flash came first, white, blinding. Then the crack of thunder slammed into us like a wall. The yoke jolted hard in my hands. Ray, I shouted, but his head whipped forward against the panel with a sickening thud. His mic fizzled. Sparks. Jumping Ray. I reached across, shaking his shoulder. Nothing. His headset hung crooked, one ear cup dangling. Mia. My voice carried sharper than I meant. She burst through the cockpit door, eyes wide. What happened? He's out. Head injury. I'm alone at the controls. Her breath caught. Oh my God. She reached for the radio panel, but I snapped. Don't touch that, just close the door and tell the passengers to stay calm. The radio hissed. Flight 237 respond. Immediate reroute to avoid cell. I grabbed the mic. ATC, this is Captain Harris. First officers incapacitated. I am assuming full control. Copy, Captain. You are entering severe storm activity. Recommend heading 280 immediately. 280, roger. I adjusted the heading. The plane shuddering against my grip. My palms were slick. From the cabin, a voice pierced the muffled hum. We're all going to die. Mrs. Lancaster. I pressed the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've had a lightning strike, but the aircraft is stable. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. My tone was calm, but my pulse was a hammer in my throat. The cockpit door cracked open again. Mia leaned in, whispering urgently. She's telling people you're not experienced enough. That this is happening because I know exactly what she's saying. I cut in, my jaw tight. Right now I don't care about her mouth. I care about getting us through this. Mia's eyes softened. It's just you now. I'm aware, I said, turning back to the controls. Another jolt rattled the cabin. Oxygen masks trembled in their compartments. Captain Harris, ATC called. You're in a convergence zone. Need you to climb to flight level 3/8. Immediately, climbing, my hand pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared louder. From behind me came the sharp shuffle of footsteps, then Mrs. Lancaster's voice, high and panicked. This is insane. She's flying this thing by herself. Someone needs to do something. I swiveled in my seat just enough to catch her eyes. Ma'am, storms don't discriminate. They just test who's ready. Sit down. Her mouth opened, then closed. She gripped the bulkhead, knuckles pale. ATC again. Wind shear detected ahead. Adjust course. 5 degrees left. 5 left. Roger. I forced my breathing to match the rhythm of my adjustments. Steady, precise, unshaken. Mia slid into the jump seat beside me, headset on. Tell me what you need. Call out altitude every 1,000 feet until we level. Watch for warning indicators. And keep an eye on that passenger door if she comes up here again. I don't have a free hand to deal with her. Mia's voice went over the cabin PA. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain is making necessary adjustments for your safety. Please remain calm. Another crack of lightning lit the windshield. The nose of the plane dipped before I yanked it back. My stomach dropped, but I didn't let it reach my voice. Altitude 29,000. Mia read off. Good, keep it coming. From the speaker's ATC's voice. Captain Harris confirmed stability. Stabilizing. Turbulence. Light to moderate. Continuing climb. Silence for a moment, except for the hum of the engines and the faint murmurs of frightened passengers behind the door. 33,000. Mia said. I allowed myself one deep breath. Almost there. Then, faintly, I heard Mrs. Lancaster again, but her tone had shifted. Less venom, more uncertainty. She's still keeping it level. Mia glanced at me. They're starting to realize. 38,000 level, Mia reported. I eased the throttle, feeling the resistance settle into my hands like an anchor finally dropped. ATC, flight 237. You are now clear of the worst activity. Recommend maintaining heading until further notice. Copy, thank you. For the first time since Ray went down, I looked at Mia fully, check on him, then secured the cabin. She nodded, stood, and disappeared through the door. I kept my eyes on the horizon line, still jagged with stormlight, but steadier now. My shoulders ached from the strain, but I didn't loosen my grip, not yet. Behind me, the cabin was quiet. No more shouts, no more challenges to my presence in this seat, but now, they needed me, whether they liked it or not. The storm's roar was a living thing, pounding against the fuselage, rattling the controls under my hands. My headset crackled with ATC's clipped instructions, but my eyes stayed fixed on the instruments. My hands steady. Mia, trim 2 degrees nose up, I said. Copy, she replied, voice tight but controlled. The cockpit lights flickered as lightning flashed across the windshield. I didn't flinch. Behind me I heard movement, footsteps, uneven, hesitant. Then, a voice I didn't expect to hear this close. I didn't know it would be like this. I didn't turn. You didn't know you'd need me. Mrs. Lancaster's breathing was shallow, her words trembling over the storm's growl. I've never, she stopped herself. Can you do it? My hands stayed firm on the yoke. I've been doing it since before you learned my name. For a moment, there was silence, except for the rain hammering the cockpit glass. ATC to flight 282. Turn heading 075 immediately. The radio blared 075. I confirmed, nudging the controls. Her voice broke again. I didn't mean what I said earlier. I almost laughed, not from humor, but from disbelief. You meant it. You just wish you hadn't said it out loud. She swallowed hard. People don't change in storms, I added. They just, to show who they've been all along. I was wrong, she whispered. You were comfortable. I corrected. There's a difference. Mia's eyes flicked toward me, then back to her panel. She knew this wasn't just turbulence we were navigating. I don't know why I reacted the way I did, Mrs. Lancaster said, her voice almost lost in the static. I do, I said flatly. You looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong here. Not in this seat, not in your world. Her hands gripped the doorframe. I was scared. Of me, I asked. She hesitated. Of not being safe. And now, her eyes darted to the lightning outside. Now I'm scared for a different reason. The nose of the plane dipped sharply as a pocket of wind tried to wrestle control from me. I held steady, easing the throttle, keeping my voice even. ATC. Flight 282 experiencing severe turbulence, requesting deviation, I called. Approved. Flight 282 maintain altitude, proceed direct waypoint Delta. A copy. I said. Mrs. Lancaster's voice was barely audible. Do you trust me now? She blinked, startled by her own question. I kept my eyes forward. You don't get to ask that yet. Her shoulders sagged. What do I do then? You sit, you wait, and you let the person you doubted bring you home. She didn't move. I'm sorry. I've never met someone like you. You have, I said quietly. You just didn't see them or you looked away. For a moment I thought she might cry. Instead, she exhaled and whispered, I'm not going to forget this. I adjusted, the trim feeling the air currents shift in our favor. I hope you remember it every time you look at someone and think they can't. The storm began to thin just slightly enough for the sky to open in patches of pale light. Mia gave a small nod. We're through the worst. Not for everyone, I murmured. Mrs. Lancaster stepped back, her voice softer. I'll be in my seat. Good idea, I said. The cockpit door clicked shut. For the next few minutes, only the hum of the engines and a TC's distant voice filled the air. My grip loosened slightly on the controls. She's different now, Mia said quietly. I shook my head. She's thinking differently now. That's not the same thing. Outside, the clouds broke, revealing the distant shimmer of the coastline. ATC, Flight 282, we have visual on destination. I reported, Roger that. Flight 282, good work up there. I allowed myself one deep breath, the kind you take when you've carried more than just a plane through a storm. The cabin was all roaring engines and squealing brakes, then lanes and then dashed cheers. I didn't cheer. My hands were still firm on the controls, my heartbeat keeping time with the strobe lights flashing through the sheets of rain outside. Welcome back to solid ground, I said into the intercom, my voice steady. I didn't look back at the faces behind me. Mia touched my shoulder lightly. You did it, I know. I exhaled, finally letting my shoulders drop. The EMTs were already rushing on board, the metallic click of their stretcher echoing in the aisle. Ray was barely conscious, pale and sweating, as they wheeled him toward the exit. I caught his eye for a moment. He didn't have the strength to speak, but his faint nod said enough, and then dash her. Mrs. Lancaster hadn't moved when the others jumped to their feet. She just sat there, hands clutched so tight around her purse strap that her knuckles had gone white. Now, slowly, she stood and began making her way down the aisle. Passengers parted for her like she carried a shadow no one wanted to touch. When she reached me, she didn't look at the controls or the rain-smeared windshield. She looked at me. I owe you my life, she said, voice trembling like the plane still shook beneath us. I kept my gaze forward, watching the EMTs disappear down the jet bridge. You owed me your respect long before that. Her mouth opened, then closed again. From the corner of my eye, I saw the way passengers froze in the aisle, glancing between us. No one said a word. The silence pressed down, heavier than the storm outside. She faltered, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. I didn't mean yes. You did, I said quietly, still not looking at her. You meant every word back there when you made sure I knew what you thought of me. Her breath caught. I was wrong. The storm still pounded the fuselage. But it wasn't the weather making the air heavy, it was her. It was me. It was the truth sitting between us with nowhere to go. You were scared, I said. And it's easier to hate someone than to trust them. She shook her head. No, it's worse than that. I thought I knew what kind of person you were. I didn't even see you didn't want to see. My voice was calm, but I could feel my pulse in my throat. You didn't want to imagine someone like me being capable, being trusted, being the one who'd hold your life in my hands. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I see it now. I turned finally, meeting her gaze full on. Because the next time you're safe and comfortable, you might forget what this moment feels like. You might go back to the way things were. She swallowed hard. I won't. I studied her for a second, long enough for her to shift under the weight of it. I hope you mean that. Not for me, for the next person who doesn't look the way you expect your hero to look. She lowered her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't say you're welcome. The cabin had gone quiet again. The kind of quiet that wasn't awkward, just reflective. A few passengers avoided my eyes. Others did in single quotes. Mia broke the silence, her voice softer. Now we should deplane, Captain. I nodded and stepped aside, letting Mrs. Lancaster pass. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something else, but then walked toward the exit without turning back. I stayed in the cockpit for a moment longer, listening to the fading sound of footsteps and the rain still hammering the tarmac. My hands were steady now, but my chest felt heavy, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing that sometimes survival isn't the only battle you win. Sometimes it's respect, and sometimes it's the quiet that follows. The moment the cabin door swung open, the cold night air rushed in, mixing with the heavy smell of burnt coffee and adrenaline. The flashing red and blue lights outside made everything inside the plane feel like it was still moving. Ma'am, this way, a uniformed ground agent said, gesturing toward the stairs. I stepped out, my legs still shaky from hours of tension. Cameras were already waiting at the bottom, bright lenses like unblinking eyes. A woman in a blazer with a press badge called out, Captain, how did you manage that landing in the storm? Before I could answer, a cluster of microphones turned toward Mrs. Lancaster, who had just emerged behind me. She froze for half a second, then glanced my way. Not the dismissive glare she'd given me at boarding, but something softer, heavier. Mrs. Lancaster's voice trembled. She saved us. Every single one of us. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, carried by the hum of camera shutters. I didn't move, I didn't smile. I just gave her a slow, measured nod, enough for the cameras, but not enough to rewrite what had happened before the storm. An airline PR rep stepped in, chirping something about remarkable teamwork, but the words felt distant, like radio static. Another reporter shouted, "Captain, what do you say to passengers who doubted you?" I looked straight into the camera. "I say I don't fly for their approval. I fly to get everyone home." My voice was steady, my heartbeat louder than the clicking of shutters. The PR rep ushered us away from the lights and noise, on the other side of the tarmac. In the shadow of the service trucks, Mrs. Lancaster lingered near me. The storm was gone, but the silence between us still carried the weight of it. "You didn't have to forgive me," she said quietly, almost like she was testing if her voice would break. "I didn't," I replied, my eyes still on the flashing lights in the distance. "I just did my job." Her inhale was sharp, like she wanted to say more, but no words came. For a second, I thought about the hours earlier, her hand gripping the armrest, her voice thick with fear, her life in my hands despite the way she'd looked at me when she first saw I was the one flying. People think storms start in the clouds, but some start long before you leave the ground. "I'll remember this," she said finally. I turned to meet her eyes. "I hope you remember it for the right reasons." She nodded once, small and deliberate, before walking away toward the terminal. I stayed where I was, the hum of engines and the distant applause from a few passengers fading into the night. I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady, the way you feel when you've flown through lightning and come out the other side. Not untouched, but unshaken. Because storms pass, but some truths stay at cruising altitude forever. The hangar smelled faintly of jet fuel and fresh coffee. I ran my fingers along the smooth edge of the pre-flight checklist. The paper cooled beneath my hand. The storm was gone. The fear was gone. But the memory that stayed. Mia poked her head into the cockpit. "You ready, Captain?" "Always," I said, even though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. She grinned. "Forecast says clear skies. Let's hope the passengers feel the same." Her laughter faded as she left, and I was alone with the hum of the instruments. I glanced at the yoke, remembering the death grip I'd had on it that night. The rain streaking the windshield, the voice in my ear whispering she refused to sit next to you. The intercom crackled. "Boarding in 5. I pulled my hat lower, checking the mirror. My own eyes stared back, calm but carrying the quiet weight of what happened. Mrs. Lancaster's voice replayed, trembling but clear. "I was wrong and I'm sorry." I hadn't forgiven her, not really, but I'd given her a safe landing. "That was enough, Captain." A flight attendant leaned in, first-class passenger asking if you're the one flying today. I raised an eyebrow. "Did they say why?" "No, ma'am. Just looked relieved." Relieved. That was new. "Tell them yes," I said, my voice steady. When the cabin door opened, I stepped out for the pre-flight welcome. Passengers turned their heads. I caught a few smiles, a few curious glances, nothing more. "Good afternoon," said into the mic. "We're expecting a smooth ride today. Clear skies ahead." The words felt different this time, not just a weather report, a promise to them, and to myself. As I returned to the cockpit, I whispered under my breath, "Clear skies ahead," letting the syllables settle into the hum of the engines. And for the first time in weeks I believed it.